I'm excited to be here today. How about you? All right. Well, show of hands. How many of you guys have ever heard of P90X? Like the at-home workout program that promises you'll get in the best shape of your life in 90 days. All right, a lot of you have heard of it. Maybe some of you have even done it. How many of you have ever heard of P19X? Okay, well, that's actually this thing where you go out and you buy the same set of P90X DVDs. You get the weights and all the gear. You go to the store and buy a big jug of protein powder, and then you do 19 minutes of on your floor and stay there for a bit, maybe cry a little, maybe not cry a little, I don't know, until you ultimately decide you're just not trying again for at least 3 to 6 months. And some of you have done P90X. I've done P19X at least a dozen times in the last decade. But about a year ago, something changed my perspective. I was talking to a buddy of mine, like one of those close friends that you've known long enough, well enough, they can say difficult things to you. And he's like a health nut and a CrossFit guy, and he's giving me a hard time about being out of shape. And so just to shut him up, I was like, okay, man, I'll do P90X. I already have the DVDs. I've started them 12 times. And about 3 days later, I finally made it to my basement, and I started the first workout, and I made it halfway through, and then I curled up in a fetal position and on the floor for a little while and decided I'm never doing this again. And he called me a couple months after that, and was like, how's P90X going? And I had to tell him, I did P19X again. I did 19 minutes of it, and then decided I can't. And so how's it going? I think I could sum it up in a single word: failure. He said, oh man, you didn't fail. I was like, oh, thanks. Because I thought he was being nice to me. I thought he was going to encourage me, like, oh, any effort is good effort. You just keep trying, buddy. Turns out that's not what he was doing at all. He said, you didn't fail, you quit. That's not the same thing. It's way worse. Failure is fine. Quitting is lame. Don't you let yourself off the hook by calling this a failure. Like, click. I don't need your negativity in my life. But it forced me to reckon with the fact that for a really long time I had used the words quit and fail interchangeably, like they're synonymous. And I had to step back for a minute and recognize that failure is when you give it everything you have and discover you can't. Quitting is when you discover it's hard and decide you won't. I think it's really easy for all of us in life to quit and then call it failure. It's kind of a self-defense mechanism. We do it in every arena of our lives. We try relationships, love, and then we discover that they're really difficult, and so we quit. And then we call it failure so that we don't ever have to try and pick up the pieces and love again. We don't ever have to feel like we should be vulnerable like that again. Some of us have these big ideas of a difference we can make for Jesus in the world. We want to go out and love broken people and invite them into community and serve them. And we invite them in and they say no. And we serve them and they're not grateful. They just use us and abuse us. And we step back and we say, well, that's a failed method. I failed at that. I'm never trying that again. And some of us have these big dreams that God's placed inside of our souls to make a difference in the places where we are, in our schools, our workplaces, our neighborhoods, and our vocations. We have these dreams about how we can make the world a more beautiful place for the people around us, but then we run into a little bit of adversity. We hit a wall and things get tough and we shrink back and we decide that we must have failed. And then we allow those God-sized, God-shaped, God-given dreams to shrivel up and die inside of our souls. And most of us, most of us have enough emotional shrapnel in our souls from just existing in this shattered world that as soon as I start talking about this stuff, as soon as you hear me start using these words quit and fail and start talking about regret, something inside you just wants to yell, it's too late for me. All I am is failure and regret. I can't possibly make a difference now. I think one of the greatest tragedies in the world is when we underestimate how much God wants to do in and through our lives. We're kicking off a brand new series this morning called The Last Arrow. And we're going to dig into what God has to say about how we can live fully and die fulfilled. How we can make every heartbeat count for as long as there is blood coursing through our veins, because time here is short. From the minute we take our first breath, we are headed toward our last breath, which means we got to stop wasting seconds and minutes and hours and years and lives because the stakes are too high. The truth is, in this life, things will always be a challenge. It'll always be a struggle. There's always a battle to fight in this broken world. There's always going to be ground that must be taken and giants that are standing in our way. And my prayer is that this series would help every single one of us get a bigger, better vision of who God is and who he made us to be, so that we'd stop longing for more but then just settling for less. That we'd stop quitting too soon. And to be clear, this is not a series about how to live a life where you achieve all of your dreams. I think so many of us, especially in this culture, have a ton of dreams about how we can become more. I want to talk to us about how we can leave a greater impact and a greater legacy by becoming less, by releasing all of the stuff that's in us that's focused on me, so that we can aim our lives in the direction God made them to go. This isn't a self-help series, it's a self-sacrifice series. I want to raise the bar for our standards of faith. I want to raise the bar for what we believe about who God is and what he can do in the world. I want to raise the bar for what we expect of ourselves. I want to raise the bar for our belief that God is present and he's real and he loves us and he equips us because he's here. And with God, there is more courage in us than there is danger ahead of us. And with that kind of courage in us, we can press onward. We can fight until we're down to our last arrow, and we cannot quit before we're finished. It doesn't mean we're not going to fail. There'll be plenty of failure along the way. I've never found a way around that, but we don't need to be afraid of failure. We need to be afraid of quitting. Because the truth is, every single one of us are uniquely designed and wired and knit together by God. There are things he wants to happen in this world that he has stamped our names on. And the last arrow is a series about what it's going to take to not quit before God has accomplished his purposes in us. What it's going to take to get to our final moments and look back on a life without regret. And the name of the series actually comes from something that happened in the life of the prophet Elisha. It's found in 2 Kings chapter 13. So if you have a Bible with you this morning, you can open it up there. If you find 1 Kings, keep going. If you hit Chronicles, go back. You can also queue up the passage in the revision app or just follow along on the screen. And if you need a Bible, or your kids do, please take one from the Next Steps table. We'd love for you to have one. But this story that we're going to look at is this obscure, weird little moment that if you're reading through 2 Kings, it'd be easy to just skip over and not give a second thought to other than, that was odd. But it's this powerful picture for us of how God works, how he relates to human beings. And it's one that illustrates, I think in a profound way, the stark contrast between living into the lives that he says he created us for and deciding to settle for something less. So this moment in history that we're about to jump into, the guy named Jehoash is the king of Israel, and his nation is surrounded by enemies on every side. Like his own people to the south and the kingdom of Judah, because at this point Israel is split into two kingdoms and they're not getting along. And then this other kingdom to the east named Aram. And Jehoash is a pretty wicked king. He's a bad dude. He's worshiping idols. He's not seeking God. He's not fulfilling the role God gave him as the spiritual leader of his people. So he's got no reason at all to expect that God will deliver him from his enemies, except for the fact that Elisha lives in Israel and God likes Elisha. So that's where we are. And it's a warm spring day. He's sitting in his palace in Samaria, and he gets news that two bad things are happening all at once. First, Hazael, the king of Aram, is amassing his armies, and he's about to attack. And second, Elisha, the great man of God, the only one who God might actually help out when the Arameans attack, is deathly ill. And just put yourself in his shoes for a second. Like, you're the king, you're responsible for this kingdom, and you're just chilling there in your king chair with your king hat on, and someone runs in and says, hey, we're going to get attacked, and Elisha's mostly dead. I think it's safe to assume that he made this exact face right here. Just this, okay? And historians have actually told us that Jehoash looked like Kramer. That's a lie. I made that up. But we don't know. He might have, okay? So he's like, what? No. And he's overcome by fear. And he runs from Samaria down to Gilgal to talk to Elisha and ask him for help. And this is where we pick up the story. So now Elisha had been suffering from the illness from which he died. And Jehoash, the king of Israel, went down to see him and wept over him. My father, he cried, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. I love this part Because if you weren't reading carefully and you didn't know the context, you'd think that Jehoash really cared about Elisha, or at least that he's like honoring this old man before his death. But that's not really what's going on at all. When he calls them the chariots and horsemen of Israel, he's looking at this guy thinking like, I am about to be in a war and I do not have a good army, but I've never needed one because this guy's with me. It's like, Elisha, as long as you've been with me, God keeps letting us win. Your presence alone is worth more than all of my chariots and all of my horsemen. And he's looking at the dying old man thinking, oh, crap. Like, he's going to die and then God won't save me anymore. It's not about his love for this voice of God in a godless country, in a godless generation. It's about his love for himself. But then this crazy cool thing happens right in the middle of that. By way of a dying old man who gives him some really odd, unusual instructions. The king probably thought that he was totally crazy. Verse 15, Elisha said, get a bow and some arrows. And he did so. Take the bow in your hands, he said to the king of Israel. And when he'd taken it, Elisha put his hands on the king's hands. Open the east window, he said, and he opened it. Shoot, Elisha said, and he shot. The Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Aram. Elisha declared, you will completely destroy the Arameans at Aphek. This is a profound moment. Elisha walks up and he places his old, frail, wrinkled hands on the young, strong hands of the king. And together they shoot an arrow to the east in the direction of Aram as a symbol that God is going before them to win the victory. But that's not the only thing that's happening in this moment. As Elisha places his hands on those hands that are not connected after God, he is inviting Jehoash to a greater future. He's conveying his spiritual authority, saying, look, you haven't done a very good job with this so far. You haven't lived into the dreams and the purpose God had for you as the king to be the spiritual leader of these people, but I'm going to be gone soon and I can't do it anymore. I'm giving it to you if you want it. Right here, right now, I'm offering you the chance to live into the dreams and the purpose God has for your life. And the people of Israel are going to need you when I'm gone. Will you step into that life? Will you do it? This is what God has for you. And the beautiful thing in the life of Jehoash and in our lives too is he doesn't even have to do anything to receive that. It's about none of his own action. It's about none of his own brilliance. God's just offering it to him. And the prophet is standing there inviting him to live into the life God made him for. And the only question is whether he'll accept the invitation. And that's what Elisha's going to find out next. You know what? I want to go back. I want to talk about something else. There are a few things I want us to see in this story. The first one's here, like in this moment where the old man has his hands on the hands of the young king. It's this: God created you for a life. Or God created you for more than a life constrained by fear. That's what Elisha's saying. Jehoash came down there because he's terrified. He has no idea what's going to happen next. He doesn't know what he can do, and he knows that he doesn't have the power to do it. And Elisha's like, God created you for more than this. I'm inviting you to more than this. God created all of us for a life that's more than one where fear sets the parameters and the boundaries of what we do and don't do. And something deep inside every single one of our souls knows that. That's why we're so dissatisfied in life when we settle for the ordinary. It's why we're so full of regrets over the things we didn't do, but we wish we had. I think so many of us get to the point where even if God was inviting us into that, even if we had that moment, even if the prophet was saying, will you live into the life God made you for? We'd say, I can't, it's too late for me. God knows who I am, God knows what I'm done, or God knows what I've done. Like, I'm too broken, I'm too messed up, I've failed too many times for this to become a reality in my life. I just need to settle and then convince myself that that's what I wanted all along. I don't know how many of you guys have ever seen the movie Old School. If you haven't, don't waste your time. But there's this moment in the movie that's pretty powerful. There's a moment where Will Ferrell's character, a guy named Frank, finds himself at a college party. And the college kids invite him to party with them. And he says, I can't. I've told my wife I wouldn't because I got a pretty big day tomorrow. Pretty nice little Saturday. we're going to Home Depot. We're going to pick out some wallpaper, maybe some flooring. And then after that, Bed Bath & Beyond, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if we'll have enough time. And here's what I found, okay? Even people who've seen the movie a long time ago remember nothing else about it. Remember that moment. People who don't know the movie remember that moment. It's not even a major plot point. It shouldn't be the single most memorable line in that entire movie, but it is the most memorable line in that entire movie for one single reason, because every single one of us as human beings resonates with the idea that it is frustrating to settle for a life that's less than what we wanted. And you can hear it in his voice when he says it. He's singing, "Is this my life?" And all of us are like, yes, I've been there. I've been in that spot. And that's why people remember it. And we look at this king, Jehoash. To this point, he's been about as bad of a king as he possibly could have been. He's wicked. He's evil. And God says, I am not done with you yet. I'm still inviting you into this. I created you for a life that's bigger and better than a life of fear. Will you accept the invitation? Will you be who you were made to be and do what you were made to do? And then this happens. Elisha says, take the arrows. And the king took them. And Elisha told him, strike the ground. Okay, and the word strike here means like shoot it, kill it, annihilate it. It's this Hebrew word for like what you hit with an arrow. So when Elisha told him to strike the ground, he didn't mean just like take one arrow and start hitting the ground. He said, shoot the ground. Shoot the ground. Take the arrows and shoot the ground. And he struck it 3 times and stopped. And the man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have defeated Aram and completely destroyed it. But now you'll defeat it only 3 times. Let's press pause real quick and admit that this does not make any sense. Like, to our modern minds, what in the world is going on? Why? Shouldn't Elijah have maybe told him that ahead of time? And how could so much hang in the balance? Not just for the life of one king, but for like his entire nation. Victory and defeat hangs in the balance of like how many times he shot the ground? Like, at that point, he's got to have a lot of questions for Elisha. He's like, well, wait up, Elisha. Next verse. Elisha died and was buried. That's the end. Right after that. That's his last words. He gets mad at him and he's like, hey, you messed up. Now you're going to lose. Great. But something deeper is going on here. The fact that the king struck the ground only 3 times was not just a small mistake. Because he started out with this promise of complete victory, and he ended up with something significantly less. And all of that happened because he only shot 3 of his arrows into the ground. He quit. Well, he still had arrows left in the quiver. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly why he quit. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was embarrassed to be a king shooting arrows into the ground. Maybe he thought the old man is just nuts. But what we do know from the context of the passage is that the number of times he shot the arrows into the ground, the percentage of the arrows left in his quiver that he was willing to shoot and willing to leave, was a direct indicator of how big his faith was that God would deliver him, of whether he really believed that he would receive what God had promised him. It was a sign that his faith was small. We wonder, well, like, why did Elisha say 5 or 6 arrows? It's like, what's he doing? He was old. He was literally about to die. He was just looking over, like, looks like he shot about half of them. He's like, you should have shot them all, man. How in the world did you leave arrows left? Why would you not shoot them all? Did I tell you to stop? I told you to shoot the arrows, and you quit. I can't help but wonder as I read this story how many battles in life are lost before they've even started. Like, how many times in my life, just like P19X, I have quit in the middle. And try to convince myself that I failed when all that really happened was that I quit. Like, I knew God called me to start, but I quit before I ever heard him tell me to stop. I have so many times I can look back on where I've prayed small, believed small, lived small, trusted small, and quit early. And I doubt I'm the only one. Second thing I want us to see in this passage this morning is this: life will always give you an opportunity to quit before you're finished. Always. There'll always be an easy way out. There'll be a bare minimum that you can do. And there'll always be a voice in your head telling you that it can't be done, it shouldn't be done, God can't come through, you already failed, and inviting you to just use that failure as an excuse to quit before you're finished. I think in our lives, we tend to get really fatalistic about failure. We say things like, well, if God wanted it to happen, then, or we say, well, I don't know the future, but I trust, like, if God wants it, then it'll happen. It'll come true, if God wanted it. And make no mistake, God is sovereign completely, and he's in control. But most of the time, when we say that stuff, we say it to protect ourselves. We say it so that we can go on believing that we really wanted God's promises to happen. It's God that didn't want them to happen. We quit before we're done. We walk around with small faith and wonder why God didn't give us big victories. We walk around with a quiver half full of arrows and blame God for the defeat in the battle. And we say to protect ourselves, well, if God had wanted it, I don't want to wake us up this morning to the voice that's echoing back from eternity. Nuh-uh. I did want it to happen. I gave you all the arrows that you needed. You are the only one in this relationship that didn't want it to happen. Like, even in our lives, when we're not confident that God's promises can possibly be accomplished through us, God is confident. He doesn't doubt it even when we have doubts. God doesn't have a crisis of faith. He just has a crisis of us. You have a contribution to make. One time Jesus gathered all of his disciples together and he told them, listen, God prepared beforehand, before you were even born, God prepared some good works for you to do so that the world around you could see him and know his love. There's stuff God wants done that he stamped your name on. I just believe he's looking for a group of people who are willing to look out at our shattered world and decide there is no option but to imagine a better future and go chase it. The third thing I want us to see this morning is this: God wants you in the fight until your last arrow is gone. Until it's gone. And we may fail along the way, we'll fail a lot, but let's fail boldly and fail forward and keep fighting till we have nothing left. And if we die there, that's a good place to die. Like, if we're going to live fully and die fulfilled, we have to die with quivers empty. There's no other way. I know it's a challenge because some of us live like the arrows God's given us are too valuable to shoot. We hold on to our talents and our abilities and our gifting, and we use them for our own benefit, but we don't want to release them for the benefit of the people around us. And we don't give with open hands. We clutch our resources tightly because those arrows look so pretty in the quiver, and they're so valuable there, and we're afraid of what might happen if we just let them go. But the thing I love about arrows, in contrast with every other ancient weapon, is that the only way they have any value is when you release them. Like a sword or a mace or a battle axe, you can hang on to those bad boys, but an arrow, if it's going to do what it was made to do, you have to let it go. You have to let it fly. God's equipped every single one of you with gifts and abilities and time and talent and resources for the fight that we're in. A fight for the souls and the future of every single person our lives crash into. And he's inviting you to let them go, to release them for the sake of the world. He wants us in the fight, and he wants us to die with quivers empty. I know that's intimidating. It's scary to get in the fight and to stay in the fight. It's scary to stop doing this thing that so many of us do so often. We just settle for mediocrity and we try and blend in so that nobody notices us and we can just survive. It's intimidating to step out of the current of culture and put yourself on the line because you believe God created you to make a difference and he's given you all the arrows you need to get that done. But what do we have to lose? Part of our mission and purpose here at Revision isn't just to build the best Revision church that we can. It's to be a church that starts churches all over this city and all over this state. And I've stood here and told you guys before, I think the picture of the future that God painted on my heart was to be a church that launches 100 churches so that more people can be reached by more churches in more places for Jesus. But if I can have a real raw moment with you, the quitter that lives inside of me is louder than the guy sometimes who wants to chase God. Like, I have these voices that thunder in my soul continuously. That like starting 100 churches costs millions and millions of dollars that we don't have. It means giving away hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of our people, which is all that we have, and probably more than we have. It means putting 10% of everything that comes in into a church planning fund. And sometimes I look at our budget and I wonder if we're going to go broke here, well, we have a whole bunch of money stowed away for other churches. And it can't be done, and it's too late to do it, and people have given their entire lives to do it and not done it, and we're going to fail. And the voices keep telling me, like, stop saying that. If you keep saying it in public, not only are you going to fail, but everybody's going to know what a gigantic failure you are. And something in that scares me to death, but I have this conviction at the same time that even if we try this and we fail, like I believe if we fight for it, if we refuse to quit, if we decide we're just a church that's going out with no arrows left, that sometime, like a long time from now, when all of us are long gone, in some corner of this state, somebody's life will be changed. Somebody's going to crash into Jesus and have their entire eternity rewritten who's never heard of Revision Church or any of us and couldn't care less because some fired up person from some fired up church we started shared Jesus with them, and it'll all be worth it. And so as scary as it is to like chase this vision, as scary as it is to do all the stuff that we're doing, to try and live into what God is asking this church to be and this church to do right here, right now in this city, my promise to you is I will not quit before I'm finished. I decided a long time ago that I am saving nothing for my next life. Will you join me? Like, will you let the dreams and the talent and the ability and the relationships you have with people who need Jesus and the potential that lives inside of you to make an impact, will you let all that dry up and die inside your soul? Or will you choose to believe that your God is bigger than your fears? Will you jump into the fight until your last arrow is gone? Will you strike 3 times? Or will you keep on shooting until the quiver is empty? There's a battle out there for the souls and the future of the people that we see every single day. There's ground that needs to be taken, and there are giants standing in our way. And there are a whole bunch of broken, hurting, lost, and lonely people living on the other side of those giants. And if we decide to shrink back, if we decide to settle for something less than the lives God made us for and called us to, if we choose lives of insignificance, that's exactly where those people will remain, in a hopeless place. But we are the church. God has promised us for thousands of years that the church, his community of called out ones, is meant to be the tip of the spear, the point of the arrowhead that goes forward and pierces the darkness around us with the light and the love of Jesus. And if we cross enemy lines, if we charge forward until the captives are set free and the battle is won, or we die out there because we're all out of arrows, if we do that, then God will use us and work through us to accomplish his purposes, and we'll live fully and die fulfilled. I want to invite you to do something this morning. You may notice when you came in, there are some tables in the back with arrows and Sharpies on them. The band's going to come back up now, and they're going to play a few songs. We're going to worship together. But as they play, I want to invite you to make your way to one of those tables and to grab an arrow and write something on it. Just as a prayer, as a commitment to God. You don't have to do it. You can stay right where you are. And writing that prayer and making that commitment doesn't mean you'll never fail again. It doesn't mean you're never going to be afraid again. It doesn't mean that you're always and consistently going to live into what God's given you. So I want to invite you. You don't have to. But if you're sitting here this morning and God is tugging at your heart and you want to just tell him, God, I want to live the life that I was born to live. I want you to accomplish everything in and through me that you made me for. I long for so much more, so please help me stop settling for less. I want to give everything I've got. I will fight until I've shot my last arrow. Then I want to invite you as the band's playing to make your way back and grab an arrow and just write on it. Hashtag all in and sign your name. God, I'm all in. Or you can write whatever other prayer that you want and sign your name and then take it home and keep the arrow as a reminder that you are saving nothing for your next life. Or if you have kids, take the arrow home, take a picture of it, keep the picture as a reminder, get rid of it before they stab each other. Whatever your life stage is, do what you got to do with the arrow, but tell God today, I'm committing to you. I'm saving nothing for the next life. I will fight till my last arrow's gone. Will you pray with me? God, thank you. Thank you for love and life and meaning and purpose. Thank you for being willing to work in us and through us, as frail and broken and fragile and fractured as we are. God, would you give us the courage that we need to live into the lives that you made us for? Would you give us the faith that we need to believe that you're going to equip us for the journey? Would you give us the will to fight against the brokenness and the pain and all the stuff in our world that is not right and is not okay with you? God, accomplish your purpose through us. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.